This is Nothing But That Sports Talk.
Welcome to Nothing But That Sports Talk. And that's how you start off the WNBA playoffs with a game winner by Shea Petty off the Mystics. You got to admit, that was sick. It's a shame that they lost in the next round, though.
It was good while it lasted. Definitely made for a good storyline.
Good run, a couple of last-second shots. That's all you want from the postseason, right?
Yeah, I know. And a lot of defense from the Connecticut Sun as they won the first two rounds against the Sky and the Sparks.
Yeah, I think Connecticut coming in definitely had some things that they could clean up. But I love that you mentioned defense, because I really think defense was the name of the game for the first two rounds and likely will be for the rest of the playoffs.
Especially Alyssa Thomas. You have playoff Alyssa Thomas, so you always have to talk about her defense.
Oh, 100%. Petty had great defense too. And Odyssey Sims, I think, was another player that was a little bit of a pest on both sides of the court to get Minnesota to advance.
Yeah, Minnesota basically got lucky in that game. I mean, the Mercury gave it their all, but Minnesota, they were just too much.
Yeah, after Petty went out, that was a big thing because she was doing such a great job on defense, and then she got hit in the face, and then she never came back into the game, and the game kind of turned around at that point. She was really making an impact on both sides.
Yeah, I think Petty tried to come back, but I mean, she had just been out, that the damage was already done. And also at that time, Rookie of the Year, Krista Dangerfield, I think started to get a little more comfortable and settle into the game. Dangerfield admitted that there were nerves going into the playoff game. It wasn't a pretty playoff game. I don't think either team played particularly well. But I think what was mentioned on the broadcast that I thought that Pam Ward, and LaChina Robinson really did a great job of discussing was that even though Phoenix is making these runs, Minnesota found a way to stay in the game. And so that way, when Crystal Dangerfield was on her game, they were right there.
Yeah, all you can say is Krista Dangerfield overcome a lot of expectations for a second-round draft pick. She really continued the winning tradition of the Minnesota Lynx. We're talking about a team that won like a little less than half the championships in 2010s. Now they have a chance to get back in the finals again and against another WNBA Finals win, the Seattle Storm. But we're going to get to that matchup in a minute, but what are your impressions about the Phoenix Mercury's run up until the loss?
I mean, Phoenix had to deal with lots of adversity this season. They had injuries. They had players leaving the Wubble. It was strange because they were somehow playing their best ball after Brittany Griner left, and that they changed their identity. Brianna Turner was fantastic and is in that conversation also. We were talking about defense before. But we got to see Diana Taurasi in a single elimination playoff game twice, and that's very lucky. We don't know how many more of those we're going to get. And just seeing her go off last night was really exciting.
Yeah, I think ultimately Phoenix kind of does what Phoenix has been doing. And Phoenix, what I mean by that is the Mercury don't necessarily have the best regular season, kind of historically at this point, but they make the playoffs. And I think that we haven't seen Phoenix really be able to get over the hump and get to a final in quite some time. And so while I think, maybe this team was overachieving, but even then, I don't think that's the case. I just wonder what it's going to take for Phoenix to be a true contender. They're definitely in the mix, but again, they just keep hitting a ceiling. And last year or 2 years ago, I suppose, when Seattle made their run, Sue Bird and the Storm had to go through Diana Taurasi and the Phoenix Mercury. And of course, that was a great series. But, I just don't know what it's going to take to get Phoenix to that next level. And I think it's also worth noting that, one of my favorite storylines of the 2020 season, Bria Hartley, not with this team, suffered a right ACL tear and had to leave the Wubble. So I don't know. I think Phoenix, they have some pieces. I think it sounds as though, anyway, that, a lot of people were making the story to be that maybe Skylar Diggins-Smith took some liberties with the play that was drawn up. And I think what that shows me is that Phoenix just needs a little bit more time as a team. They had all the pieces to be right there, but once they're refined and have some of those elements back, I think this can be the team, particularly if DT has another season in her, which I suspect she does. I think that she does. It'll be interesting to see if Sandy Brundello can really sand out some of those rough spots that they went through in 2020.
Yeah, and you know what? Diana Taurasi, up until the season, she's shown that she still got it. After all the blood, sweat, and tears she put into this game, she clearly showed that she still got it by leading the comeback against a team that won the championship last year. And getting back to that game-winning shot by Shea Petty, she hit it off a team that she won the championship with. It just shows that she's going to be relevant in the near future.
I hope that's what it means. I think, if anything, her story shows how difficult it can be to get a stronghold and get your foot into the WNBA. So I hope that Shea Petty has played well enough to show that she really belongs here. But I think, there's so many stories of players that have amazing seasons, amazing moments in the WNBA. And unfortunately, they don't stay for long. So I hope that we see that from Shea. But what I love about Shea is that she shows that hard work and good defense will keep you in the WNBA, at least for a time.
Yeah, I mean, this season, more than any other, there were so many, because of the COVID opt-outs and because of the social justice opt-outs, there were opportunities for some players that never would have gotten them. There were so many, I mean, you look at the Liberty having 7 rookies, and you look at how many players got a chance, and it just further emphasizes how difficult it is to get a spot in this league, because there are so many players that are deserving. And this league going forward, hopefully, will be able to eventually expand because the talent is there.
Exactly. And the New York Liberty, they have, as me and Erica talked about, like, they really have a lot of development to do. I mean, you're talking about 7 rookies. Well, 6, but you're not counting the one that only played like 3 games because of the injury. And when Sabrina Nielsen does come back, it's going to take time for her to get adjusted to the offense that the Liberty are trying to put together. That 3-point style offense that Will Hawkins have been preaching about. I mean, he always remained positive and every time the Liberty lose. Even though they get blown out, he always sees some positives to take out from those losses and the wins they did get.
Yeah, I mean, Walt was really a breath of fresh air in that locker room, I think. And that's not taking anything away from Katie Smith, but just to have such a young team and such a, like, basically there was a fresh start for everybody. And it was not an easy task. And to keep an eye on what the bigger picture is and in installing a new system, it wasn't going to happen. It wasn't going to happen in a day. So in order to, like, for him to stay that positive, and for the team, that team was, there aren't going to be a lot of teams that finish with 2 wins in 22 games and are going to be sad about leaving the bubble. Like, there's a really good atmosphere there, and there's a culture that's being built.
Yeah, I think all of that is fair, and I think it is definitely a bright spot, the way Walt sees the game and how he can put his players at ease and always get them to see the positive. However, Rafique and I have talked about this before, and, I really think there are some criticisms and critiques that need to come out of this Liberty season, especially because they're coming off of 2 consecutive losing seasons. And for me, I think Walt needed to be a little bit more nimble with his vision for the offense, given the tools that he had. I don't think having a 3-point dominant team with this roster suited their strengths. When we saw them run the ball, when we saw them be aggressive on the defensive boards to get buckets in transition. I mean, if arguably one of their best games was the last game of the season, that was actually a part of the game plan. And they did that, not game planning for their own strengths, but game planning for Dallas, who had a short bench. So I think that I wish that the the framework would pivot a little bit, at least if we see some of the elements like a Jazz, like Jazz, if she's going to be on the roster, if Paris Key is going to be on the roster. These are players that you gotta let them, spread their wings and fly up the court.
That was something I was looking forward to when I thought, okay, the Liberty are going to have one of the youngest teams in WNBA history, as I thought that we would see them run up and down the court. And I think that some of that trouble might have been because they didn't have a de facto point guard once Sabrina went down. Both Laisha Clarendon and Jazz Jones were saying that they were put into positions that they hadn't played in a long time. Jazz said she hadn't played point guard since high school. So it was a little bit tough, but I agree, especially getting Asia Durr back. She was in her best in the open court. And Jazz is just downhill as soon as she has the ball. But Sabrina, the first couple of games, I remember there was that one play right before she got out where she dove backwards and gave a tip, and then they're running out the other way. We saw a little bit more of that transition, but I agree. I would love to see this team really push the pace and put pressure on other defenses.
Yeah, based on everything we've been talking about these past couple episodes, what you wanted, Erica, this is basically like a work your way into 2021 season, because that's when you really get a sense of how the Liberty are going to gel going into next year's playoffs. But yeah, now this gets a more impression. What are your impressions about the Connecticut Sun? Because defense wins championships with them.
For me, Connecticut is a really interesting team. In the last few playoff runs, I was right there with Connecticut and saying, I think they're, being underestimated. And this season, I think actually I might have been on the other side. I thought DeWanna Bonner was asked to do a lot, especially early on in the Wubble. And I just wondered if it was sustainable, because we've never seen Bonner have to really play that ace role when being on a team with Diana Taurasi and Brittany Griner. So I was curious how that would weigh on DeWanna Bonner going into the playoffs. But I think if anything, that solid just kind of foundation, who for me, for Connecticut, is Alyssa Thomas, is just as strong as ever. Jasmine Thomas has been in and out of the lineup. Breon January in and out of the lineup and playing with a dislocated finger. There's a lot of grit on that team, and they have more maturity than they have had in the past. Not just maturity, and I talk about this with the Liberty, so not just players that have years in the league, but also have minutes, significant minutes, playoff minutes, championship caliber level minutes in the WNBA. And I think that is ironing out, and they're hitting their stride at the perfect time.
Yeah, DeWanna Bonner basically have like the two-way offense that the Connecticut Sun might actually need, and also the two-way defense. She can put pressure on the ball and off-the-ball pressure. She can shoot the three-pointer. She can get inside and catch and sweep it. DeWanna Bonner has it all.
Yeah, I remember at the beginning of last season, she got off to a crazy start there, and then just kind of slowed down because there was just a lot being put onto her. She was putting up like 30 and 10 lines for like 2 weeks, and everyone was talking about her as an early MVP candidate. So to see her at this point of the season still, especially in last night's game, because Alyssa Thomas got off to a slow start offensively last night, and DeWanna Bonner was all over the place. She was grabbing the boards. It was really great to see from her.
Yeah, I know. But getting to the win against the Los Angeles Sparks, do you think it's more the Connecticut Sun were more good offensive team, or just the Sparks had no offense whatsoever, shooting only 11 from the field, 11%?
I think it's always a little bit of both when it comes to the playoffs. I don't think that, it's just one thing. I think what we saw in all of the games yesterday in particular is that when it comes to the playoffs, the scout is laser sharp. You have a season worth of film that you can watch, and a coaching staff that can really go in and fine tune ways defensively to really stop key players. We saw Nafisa Collier have a tough time. We saw we saw Crystal Dangerfield have a tough time. You know, Alyssa Thomas have a tough time. Skylar Diggins-Smith. These were amazing players. But what you also heard, especially again last night, is that the teams felt that any defensive stops that they were getting were stellar defensive plays, but more than anything, it was a real concentration on team defense. And I think that's just something that, for whatever reason, is not necessarily such a focus, or maybe it's just my impression. It's not always such a high focus in the regular season, but it almost seems like defense is at top of mind when it comes to playoffs.
Yeah, in the playoffs, defense wins championships, which we already know, but it's always good to get a reminder, especially in the WNBA. And, well, the Connecticut Sun going into the Las Vegas Aces series, that's going to be an interesting series because we're talking about something that, well, the Vegas Aces, I'm sorry about that. We're talking about the Las Vegas Aces having won a defensive juggernaut on the Connecticut Sun. They're 2-0, I guess, in the season. But we'll get more into that a little bit later. Speaking of the Las Vegas Aces, we pretty much already cleared the first round. We got to congratulate Asa Wilson on being the MVP. What are your impressions on that?
Well deserved. I mean, there's really nothing bad anyone can say about A'ja Wilson. She was phenomenal. And coming into the season, there were lots of questions when Kelsey Plum tore her Achilles and when Liz Cambage opted out. And then that was coming off her sophomore year where there were lots of questions about the fit with Cambage and how A'ja took a little bit of a step back after winning Rookie of the Year. So just to see her come into the season and dominate, it was great. And I'm so happy that she got that award and that it wasn't as tightly contested as some social media would have you think it was.
I couldn't agree more on that point. I think I was talking with Pepper, Dish with Pepper, and I mentioned that, you know, I think a lot of people will look at Stewie and which we saw all season, be very drawn to the storyline of her returning from an Achilles, which is extremely, I mean, that's miraculous, especially she spent $30K of her own money. So all of her success is quite literally hard earned. She paid for it. But what I think is important is to remember that MVP stands for most valuable player. And again, from that last game, Rafique and I talked about this last time, but from that last game of the season where the Aces were able to clinch the number one spot to throughout, the game has gone through A'ja. And Myles, to your point, that's something that Bill said from day one, quite literally, when the Aces drafted A'ja Wilson, they were going to build a team around A'ja Wilson. And I think Bill, you know, yesterday and throughout the week has just been really talking about the growth, the mindset also that A'ja brings to that fact. Everyone on the Aces knows it. Everyone in the stands knows it. Everyone in the booth knows when you call an Aces game, the Aces go as A'ja goes. And I think A'ja took that on. And I think that was shown in how emotional, right, she got when she was surprised with the announcement. So it's really great to see. And now we'll get to see playoff A'ja again and see what that growth and maturity looks like in the postseason.
Yeah, A'ja Wilson, she didn't really think she was going to win the MVP. I mean, she thought she was going to win, but she said in the conference that it wasn't really her focus. She was more focused on winning the championship. And that mentality is the reason why she got the Aces to the top record, and that they're going to be facing the Connecticut Sun in the semifinals and either the Minnesota Lynx or the Seattle Storm in the WNBA finals if she gets that far. And talk about A'ja Wilson. She went from being a national champion in 2018, lottery pick, first round pick, number one overall, to obviously, I mean, one of the greatest up there. I mean, assuming that she keeps this up, do you see her being up there as one of the top players alongside Diana Taurasi or Kansas Parker, who won Rookie of the Year and MVP at the same year? And, oh, yeah, Sylvia Fowles.
I mean, I try not to be hyperbolic as much as possible, but it's also just watching A'ja. She's the future of the league, and I don't know, we're gonna have to wait until everything's all said and done to actually place her on the all-time levels, but she's going to be very, very good, and she's going to be an all-star for the next decade.
I liken her more to a Tamika Catchings or a Maya Moore. And I think the reason that I say that is, one, because she has a similar demeanor to those two. Off the court, there are not very many people that have negative things to say about Maya Moore or Tamika Catchings. And I think the same is true of A'ja Wilson. I think they carry themselves with a certain level of maturity and respect, and love and joy that people really appreciate. On the court, A'ja Wilson is about that business. Rafique, you rattled off some of the points on her basketball resume, but I think, Myles, you're right. It's going to take a little time to be sure, but I think she's of that cloth of a player that is solid, consistent, maybe not an MVP every year, at least by the vote, but someone who you know what you're going to get, and even for opponents that know what A'ja is going to bring, they have such a difficult time stopping A'ja. Like, when we get to see peak A'ja, because I don't think we're there yet, but when we get to see peak A'ja, I just think her consistency, or like a Tina Charles, who doesn't get enough respect for her game, I think, personally. But Tina Charles, triple team, she's still gonna just bang them on you. Like that's what Tina does. So I think that's going to be really exciting. And especially what I love is that the Aces, again, are building pieces around A'ja, and I think she seems pretty happy there. And so I think Bill Laimbeer, as general manager, head coach, is really trying to build a strong dynasty, and so far so good.
Bill Laimbeer has been known to build championship teams. I mean, look at what happened back when he was coaching the Detroit Shock. Talk about a shock. Even though they're now the Dallas Wings, but Bill Laimbeer has been known to be involved in that championship team, from the Bad Boy Pistons in the '90s to also the Detroit Shock coaching, to the Liberty coaching to the Eastern Conference Finals in 2015. So right now, you have a chance to get the Aces back into the WNBA Finals in the second time as an Aces coach. This guy puts together a strong chemistry. He talked about developing the offense. He talked about keeping the energy consistent. Bill Laimbeer does it all. It's a shame he couldn't get Coach of the Year this year like he did in recent years, because a lot of so the Lynx got it. What are your impressions on that?
I mean, I thought I would have been absolutely fine with either of them. And that was the closest competition that we saw for the votes. It was Cheryl Reeve. We came into this season worried that they weren't going to have a point guard. And then Crystal Dangerfield went on to win the Rookie of the Year as a second round pick. But Cheryl Reeve was really putting it all together. And then she brought in Katie Smith, and she had her all-female staff, which was really fantastic. And I mean, every year you just can't go wrong with her. And she's, like you said, created a dynasty there, and that team's going to be competitive every year. And for them to do what they did after they lost Sylvia Fowles also for most of the season, and to be able to adapt on the fly. We were talking about coaches making adjustments and how difficult that can be. That team was able to, even last night in the middle of the game, still was missing some bunnies at the rim that she normally doesn't. And then Damiris Dantas played the entire second half and was hitting lots of big shots for them.
And that's exactly what puts Cheryl Reeve over the edge for me this season, is because, and I think the storyline is a little overstated when it comes to certain coaches, as far as they didn't have the pieces that they thought they were going to have. Well, you know what? That's for every team. So, I guess the desire to keep that as a storyline, but every coach had to do that. The difference, I think, and maybe even why Mike Thibault should have been more strongly considered, is because where I think Cheryl Reeve did a much better job than some coaches is really allowing, I should say empowering her players to step up, challenging them and trusting them to step up. Cheryl Reeve made no qualms about how she had no intention of giving Crystal Dangerfield as much time as she did. But when Crystal stepped up to the plate, Cheryl Reeve let her do her thing. but it wasn't just Crystal. Everyone's talking about Crystal, of course, because she won Rookie of the Year. Damaris Dantas, an amazing story. Bridget Carlton, when Sylvia Fowles, one of those first games that Sylvia Fowles missed, which then led to a whole string of games. Bridget Carlton stepped up and had an amazing game. And then she was able to be consistent with it. So that tells me, and maybe this is more talking to Cheryl Reeve as a GM, but one, as a GM, she built a team thinking about the future, and in a way that obviously played out earlier than intended, but it still worked. But two, I just think that you change the game plan to who you have, while also thinking of what you want. And I think Cheryl, more than anyone for me, looking at the personnel, did the best job of balancing that, of focusing on the here and now, but also building out toward the future.
Yeah, Cheryl Reeve really knows how to put together a squad. You got a second-round pick that managed to get a Rookie of the Year award. You also have Sylvia Fowles, who surpassed the most rebounds in the WNBA overall. And also, you can't forget the rest of the roster. Lexi Brown. What more can you say? That's all I got to say. They swept the first two championships. They snagged one for the Indiana Fever a while back. And now you have a chance to get back in the finals again, going up against another weighted team in the Seattle Storm, as I mentioned earlier. But since I mentioned that, why don't we just get into our predictions for the semifinals? Like, who do you think is going to win between the Lynx and the Storm? Because obviously, it's going to be evenly matched. I don't feel this is going to go 5 games. We just don't know who's going to win. But if I had to give it to a team, why not give it to the Seattle Storm? As good as the Lynx are. Seattle's just better.
I mean, it's tough. Seattle won both matchups this season in blowouts. One was 90-66. The other one was 103-88. And one game, Sylvia Fowles was there. One game, she wasn't. But both times, what I saw was that Dantas was the top scorer. So Seattle's not a team that you can, and I was listening the other day to Pepper's podcast that you were on, Erica, and you were talking a lot about, when you were talking about the Defensive Player of the Year award, just like Seattle's defense. That's where this series is really, that's why I have to lean Seattle. It's just, there's not just one or two players you can focus on. All 5 of them that are going to be out there are going to be giving fits to this Lynx team. So I think that's where it's going to come down to. It'll be on that end and just the depth that Seattle has.
Yeah, it's last night's game, Phoenix, Minnesota, was a grudge match. Again, I don't think either one of those teams played their best game. And the grit was unreal for Minnesota, which made me think a little bit more about my prediction when it came to, having to think into the future about this matchup. But at the end of the day, Myles, I tend to agree with you that Seattle is just such a good defensive team. And I think it won't be as much of a blowout. I don't know if it'll go 5 games. I think I'm leaning towards 4. But I do think Seattle takes it, and I think ultimately Seattle's going to be able to deploy their offense the way they want more than Minnesota, is my guess. So it's going on that defense, but I also think that, when you're comfortable in your offense, usually good things happen. And I think that, Seattle will probably have their way and be able to stick to their game plan. I think Minnesota will have to be very nimble, as I like to say, and will really have to, see which player steps up at what point in time. Whereas I think it's pretty lock solid. We know who's going to do what for Seattle.
Yeah, it's the best offense versus the best defense. And Minnesota clearly showed that they were the better defensive team in their game against the Phoenix Mercury, when Skylar Dickinson-Smith missed a potential go-ahead shot. If she made that shot, we want to have a different conversation, like, for instance, a rematch of the conference finals in 2018. Semifinals. It's tough to get used to the fact that they readjust the playoffs. And I think you tweeted earlier that you want the playoff format to go back to the way it was or change it up. Why would you say that?
Well, for one, we'd have, if I'm not mistaken, we'd have more basketball. So I want more basketball. I don't know. I got the sense partially also that the playoff format was changed for a handful of reasons, neither of which are my favorite. One is kind of for the WNBA, again, to be a guinea pig to the NBA, but also to condense an already pretty tight season. And I think both kind of downsell what the WNBA has been. I think we're really at a whole new wave of WNBA talent, and I just want as many games. And I think another thing before I kick it over to you, Myles, for your thoughts is kind of, I don't know, I get the sense that you can really build some spicy rivalries when you have playoff series. Because again, it goes back to who's going to step up, who's going to make. I mean, last night, Candace Parker in the final press conference of the year is talking about all of the moments that she remembers. She remembers losing in Minnesota this year. She remembers losing to Phoenix because of a Brittany Griner. You know, like just all of those things. The players take that with them. And I she was talking about series. She wasn't talking about one and done playoff games. She was talking about series. So that's why I want the old format back. You get rivalries within the conference, you get series, and ultimately you get more playoff basketball.
Yeah, 100%. The more basketball, the better. And also like you were saying, anyone can win one game. Unfortunately, like last night, Nneka Ogwumike couldn't play because she had bad migraines before the game, and that changes up the entire game plan. Is that a fair representation of a team that fought their way to the third seed to be then gone within 24 hours? There were the emotional Chicago Sky post games where the players, I think it was Gabby Williams, said that she wasn't even packed and was going to have to be out within 24 hours. It's like, especially this year, these players were playing every other day and were really, really grinding. And then to have it all gone in one day, in one game, is really, really difficult. So selfishly, I want more basketball, but also for them, they've earned the right to be out there to really battle. And I just think one game is not enough for that. Maybe for the first round, maybe for that, so that there's some kind of incentive for the higher seeds more than just the top two having them. Maybe that first round could be a one and done, and then you can get that March Madness style. But once you get to that second round, that's got to be 3 games for me.
Totally agree. Yeah, 3 and 4 seed are playing a one and done game. That's tough. So yeah, I'm with that. A little bit of a hybrid. Give us the madness early, and then give us a proper series by round 2.
Yeah, and you know what? Here's what I'm thinking they should do. The first round, make it a best of 3. Second round, best of 3. And then keep the semifinals and the finals the way it is. What would your impressions be on that one?
I could get with that. I mean, it kind of takes you back to how the WNBA used to do things, where everything was a 3-game series. I mean, another thing we could do is go 1, 3, 5, 7. I don't know. That would be a grueling schedule for whoever makes it to the final, I guess, especially if they come through that first round.
You know what? If you saw how the NBA was when it first started, it wasn't always 7-game series each and every round. Let's not forget. So the WNBA is working its way towards getting to that point.
Well, I think that the NBA playoffs are way too long. Those 4 series that are 7 apiece. I do like the idea of the further you get along, the longer the series get, because you've earned more time there to really compete and to really get into that grind, that rivalry grind.
Yeah, we fixed it. There we go, Rafique. We fixed it.
Yeah, that'll work. Now on to another prediction: the Connecticut Sun versus the Aces. Who you guys have? Because I got the Aces winning it all. I mean, as good as the Connecticut Sun were, let's not forget they lost both times to the Aces by at least 18 to 20 points.
Well, I mean, yeah, it goes back to that's why these teams, aren't a 3-4 seed. Again, I went with Aces and Seattle in the final, so I'm going to stick with that. But I think the way that Connecticut played against the Sparks, this could go 4 or 5 for sure. 5. I could see it going 5. And they have pulled out the disrespect CT. So, we know that they've got a chip on their shoulder, and they've come this far. Why not go for another 5-game series? So I think I'm still giving the edge to Las Vegas, but if they fall with an injury or, I think it'll be a harder in series one way or another, but I still give the edge to the Aces.
I think this one goes 5. I'm also very, very hesitant to pick against Connecticut just because of the disrespect narrative that's going around. The Aces have been really, really good throughout the season, but the Sun started 0-5, and they've been the hot team since then. Not obviously a 1 seed like Vegas was able to pull off, but again, like you said, both games that they played each other this season were blowouts, and Vegas took 7 out of the 8 quarters. So it was really a pretty consistent. In both of those games, Asia Wilson went off. She had 21, and then she had 24, and both times, one was, I think she shot 8 of 13 and 10 of 13. She was really, really on and getting her looks. And when she's getting to where she wants to on the floor, because she's a player that there aren't a lot of superstars that are playing inside the 3-point line. You know what she's trying to do, and then she's still doing it. And she did it twice to Connecticut. So even with their defense kind of shrinking down to try to stop her in the playoffs, I think this is going to go 5, but I have the Aces taking the edge here.
Yeah. The Aces can win if they just learn how to take a couple more 3-point shots. I mean, not too many 3-point shots where you're missing a lot, but trying to make sure that the 3-point shooting is consistent in a percentage standpoint. Because 3-point shooting is going to determine how good an offense really is. Not just how you score the inside or on the low block, but the 3-point shooting is a big contribution to any team offense in basketball, both on the women's side and the men's side. It's just a lot to think about. So basically, we're sticking with our picks as the Aces and Seattle Storm. Hopefully that happens next time any one of you is on the show. So, yeah. Speaking of men's and women's side, college basketball announced earlier this week that it's making its return on November the 25th. What were your impressions when you found out college basketball is coming back for the women's side?
Well, I mean, it's really tough for me to react to sports during a pandemic still. So that's always where my mind goes, especially with the madness that is happening in American football. So that's my first reaction. I think my next reaction is I'm just hopeful that everything will keep all of the students top of mind. So I'm using students and not student athletes for a particular reason. I just want to make sure that, anything that student athletes might have access to that will keep them safe, and any COVID protocols. I hope that that's something that colleges and universities are able to do across the board, because unfortunately we still are seeing, some pretty heavy stuff come from COVID. So that's honestly my first thought. My next thought is, just there've been so many coaches and players that have also been very active when it comes to racial and social injustice. I don't see the NCAA as the beacon of being supportive of athletes and just people overall. But I don't know. I think that can make for a really interesting conversation as well. And then if we get some good basketball, that's exciting too. But honestly, a return to play, I'm having it in women's hockey now, a return to play kind of raises some eyebrows first and foremost for me.
Yeah, it's twofold for me because I already have lots of issues with the state of the NCAA when we're not in a pandemic. But then now we've already kind of had test runs with the professional level sports that we've seen some sports opt for bubbles and some not. And that's and the sports that haven't, Major League Baseball and the National Football League, have these really over the top COVID protocols that need to be in place and for this to have any chance. And I'm worried about the equality of the opportunity to all of these schools and not just to the top 10. I want to make sure that that's true for the men's programs and the women's programs, not just men's Duke basketball or whatever, like Oklahoma football, whatever the big schools are. And based on the track record of profit being more important than the athletes themselves, I don't have a lot of faith that they can do this well. And just that's the immorality of college sports as it stands today. So I'm really apprehensive about all of it.
Yeah, but people got to keep in mind the whole purpose of college sports is to work your way into the pros. Like, for instance, women's basketball, these players are working their way into getting a contract with the WNBA. And so it may not look like something that needs to be played, but there's a reason why college basketball needs to happen in one shape or form. But in your opinion, do you think November 25th is the best date for college basketball to return?
I don't know. I mean, honestly, I really don't know because it's hard for me. I don't agree that we need it. So I'm really kind of still stuck there. But I think also just, I don't have a calendar in front of me, but that's kind of rubbing up to Thanksgiving. I suppose they always play around Thanksgiving anyway, but I think if this is the inevitable, it's happening. I think what people need to be prepared for, which we also saw in the wobble, is that, elite athletic bodies being at rest or not able to work out the way they usually do, just like me, right? If I sit on my couch and eat donuts, I want to, but I'm not moving. I just think that the level of play is going to be a little bit different. And I also just wonder about injuries.
Yeah.
Or to burst that NCAA bubble, but I just have so many concerns.
I definitely understand this being the best opportunity for these players to get their games on tape for the next level. It's such a small percentage. Because of that, like for next year's draft, the Liberty are once again have the best odds. I don't know how much tape they're going to be able to get and how informed they're going to be as compared to other years based on whatever we see, because it's impossible to predict what's going to happen. It's so far the trajectory has been pretty much down, so we can predict that it's not going to go well. I mean, I'm more worried than I am excited.
Yeah, I don't blame you for that. I mean, look what happened. The March Madness tournament got canceled earlier this year. Let's keep that in mind. You couldn't even play a whole half a game. You barely even got to sneak in a half of an NCAA tournament conference game when it was St. John's versus Creighton before they realized, you know what, we're canceling the rest of the season because the coronavirus cases is too demanding, it's too risky, let's just cancel everything. And now you're coming back on November 25th thinking that things are not going to get back up to where it was. I mean, we're dealing with the global pandemic here. A year ago, you wouldn't have all these concerns. Right now, we have these concerns. And it comes like nearly 7 days after the NBA draft, ironically, which is what is locked into. But you know what? When college basketball happens, do you think you're going to see any fans or at least the students attending the games this season? If it was up to you?
Well, sorry. If it was up to me, absolutely not. I know. But also, I live in New York and I'm in a liberal bubble here. I understand that, that how I see the world is not how lots of the country sees the world. And some of these places are already pushing in football. I think there were 4 games last week that had fans in the stands, and even at smaller capacity. I saw that one of the college football conferences that was coming back has like a 5% COVID rate before they decide to shut down. So it's not like they're already moving the goalpost a little bit where it's like, okay, we know that some people are going to get this. And then the idea of then exposing more people, it's just all, obviously it's all going to come down to money, because that's what it always has come down to when they're putting student before athlete, like that whole amateur conversation. But I don't know, I can't really give a positive prognosis or opinion about fans in the stands.
Yeah, I would say no fans. I just don't know that it's worth it, except, of course, for the dollars and cents of it all. However, in this way, I guess women's sports is uniquely set up, not for this design, but, there are not many women's programs that are seen as a profit, they're not the kind of go-to team to make the profit. I think maybe UConn is probably one of them, if I had to guess, especially kind of seeing how other UConn teams perform. But, I think that there might be more thought given to playing safely in a women's scenario, since I think, again, most schools, if they make a profit off their women's teams, they're probably, like, all right, we'll take it, but that's not necessarily something that they're aiming for. So in some ways, I think that allows women's sports to, again, I just like this term, be nimble, right? So I guess if you want a positive review, as someone who covers women's sports, I'm a little bit more optimistic when it comes to that, just because I think some of the accoutrement, right? Women's sports don't have that luxury in a normal season, so why would they expect it during a pandemic? But with that said, I hope that does not mean that these athletes and these students, again, they should have access to everything and anything that will keep them healthy and safe if they're being asked to play during a global pandemic. But another thing is, like, we don't talk about, you have to have certain vaccinations when you go to college. So there is a precedence when it comes to mandating certain health and safety standards to be at a school, whether it's public or private. And so I just wonder if maybe we can think of masks and staying 6 feet apart, kind of like getting a tetanus shot or whatever else, mumps and measles or whatever else you have to get when you go to college. It's been a while since I've been in college, but I'm pretty sure that's still how it works, because we understand that these vaccinations were created because of outbreaks that happened in previous history that wiped out a large percentage or too much of the population. So I just kind of want us to maybe think about that when it comes to the college environment, and hopefully put some of those mandates in place and really be serious about them, just as when we have to submit our health record to enroll.
And you know what? There's going to be a lot of promising talent coming into college basketball that might not want to play because of COVID concerns. I mean, look at all the players that walked away from the NBA bubble and the WNBA bubble. Look at a couple of NFL players that decide not to play. Look at the Major League Baseball players that decide not to play. I mean, you can't put count how many college basketball teams there are in the women's and women's side. You can't put that many amount of teams in a bubble. It's just not possible. Unless you want to do it in 10 different locations, like a bubble in the East, a bubble in the West, a bubble in the South, a bubble in the North, a bubble in foreign countries. You can't do that. So I don't know how you're going to manage to do the college basketball season when it comes back on November 25th. I mean, with no fans allowed, you're going to put like those miles like you did with the NBA bubble? Or are you going to you can't do it the way you put 22 teams in a bubble in Orlando, Florida, playing 3 different basketball courts, or 12 different WNBA teams playing in 2 different basketball courts in Bradenton. You can't do that. Okay, get to the point. If you was an athlete right now, would you play?
No.
Why?
For all of the things that I've already said. I just don't see myself doing that. And I was a student athlete, and there are a lot of things that I did as a student athlete that I probably, would have thought about, especially as someone who was not under scholarship. So no, but I would not. The way I feel about how I live my life on a daily basis, assuming that I would also feel like that being a college athlete, I absolutely 1000% would not only would I not play, but I would find an alternative to being in a classroom so that I could get my education. And if that weren't possible, then I would get my money back. But I would not play.
What about you, Myles?
I I mean, I don't think I would play. It's a tough hypothetical because I know that every school, at least around here, has been setting their own rules for in student um, classes and for just availability for resources. So if I had the luxury to be able to not play and still have career aspirations, or if I was just the end of the bench and this was going to be the last time I was going to play organized sports, I don't think it's worth the long-term risk to myself and to the people that I care about that I'm spending time with now by creating my own bubble to try to be as safe as I can.
Exactly. I mean, think about it. You mentioned before, Erica, as a student athlete. If you had not stopped playing sports, you would have gone from walking away from playing the sport that doesn't necessarily pay you to walking away from a sport where you're paid more than enough to pay everybody's bills in your own household. That's just so technically when you're walking away because of the COVID concerns, you're not really losing anything. You're missing a season, but you're not really losing anything if you really think about it.
I mean, it's too hard to work with those hypotheticals because again, I'm a Black woman, so like I'm not making millions regardless. The chances are very low. So I mean, at the end of the day, for me, like living the life, a healthy and safe and well-informed life is more important. But you know, maybe if my prospects were a little bit higher in sports, I mean, I get it to some extent. But again, going back to in this case, you know, the overwhelming misogyny and sexism in this country is probably a good thing because women have, you know, arguably less to lose. And being nimble, having to get an education, working multiple jobs while also being a pro athlete is a part of being a woman who also happens to be a pro athlete. So, I mean, everyone can make their own decision and still be fine. I don't know that the pressure, I'm assuming that the pressure is not the same. But with that said, I mean, men can also make a choice, but also because of sexism in this country, they'll probably have a different type of stereotype and guilt around that. But I think at the end of the day, keeping people safe and healthy is something that we should all celebrate.
Yeah, you make a good point. Now, you mentioned sexism. I want to get to another topic before we wrap it all up. What are your impressions about the Maria Taylor storyline involving a Chicago Railroads saying what he said, a tweet about her?
You know, I honestly did not take in exactly what was said because it's of no significance. I can guess what was said. Um, I just don't take in that energy because I can't. It's not surprising. It's something that happens to a lot of women and it happens to them every day. So I guess if anything, the surprise comes from the company doing something and removing him. So, you know, I guess that's all I have to really say. I mean, I don't know what else to say about it.
Yeah, but to be more clarified, he said in a tweet that Marie Taylor dressed like something about her dressing like she's hosted an AVN award show. That, well, I'm not even going to say what it is because I'm not going to get into that topic because that's not really what the show's about. But if you see the tweet, you get a better understanding of what I'm talking about because I'm not going to really say what AVN award means. You can look it up because it's a sports show and I don't like talking about anything inappropriate, but you get what I mean.
Yeah, I also didn't follow too closely outside of whatever kind of came into my social media sphere. It's unfortunately nothing new for women in sports, for Black women in sports, especially once they've achieved a level of fame where there's more exposure and access. And now it feels to a lot of these, you know, random sports guys that can jump on Twitter and say something, they feel like they have the right to that and they don't. And 9 times out of 10, there are no consequences. So I'm grateful that there were in this instance, but there's a lot of horrible things that happen in this country with 0 consequences. And it's a small mercy, but the fact of the matter is that guy was not the only person that said terrible things about her, I'm sure. He was just the only one with a platform that was that size, and she goes through that every single day, and that's awful. Like there's should be just a zero tolerance level like that everywhere.
Yeah, there's zero tolerance in every broadcast field. Well, that is it for Nothing But That Sports Talk. Thank you guys for jumping on, Erica and Myles. I really like being in the Liberty conferences with you guys, and I hope I get to be back with you next season. Like I said to you, Erica, the last couple of times you was on this episode. And Myles, good luck with what you do for the New York Liberty and the National Republic. Really doing a good job in the journalism field.
Thanks so much, both of you.
Yes, likewise. Always a pleasure.
Yeah. And to all the big balls out there, get your head in the game.